Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be having a look at creative writing today. So for those of you that maybe teach English or are doing creative writing with primary school students, hopefully you're going to learn a lot today. So we have had a great question in the YouTube chat this morning. How do we say scone or scone, depending on how you say it? Which one does it rhyme with? Which is a great one when we're thinking about creative writing, and definitely a controversial one. We had definitely had some arguments today in the chat, and I think we will do a follow-up question later on today about cream and jam, but we're not going to open that Pandora's box right now. But today, as I said, we're going to be looking at creative writing, and we're joined by me. So I'm Kiri Gooch. I am the National Accounts Manager in the Google for Education team, and we're also joined by Matt Smith, who is a Google certified trainer with Aspire to Be. We also have Jonathan Evans, or John, and Vicky Price, who are going to be talking about their story of using G Suite for distance learning. So we've got some great speakers coming up today. And if you do have any questions for them, or if there's anything specifically that you want to ask about G Suite or anything that we're covering today, please pop it in the chat and we'll get to that during the Q&A sections. We will be leaving time throughout the webinar today to do so. So for today, I'm going to get started by just talking to you about what resources are available for you to kind of get started with G Suite, but also learn a little bit more. So for those of you that are brand new to G Suite, we have a whole host of productivity tools that can help you, particularly in an education setting. Things like Google Docs and Google Forms and Google Classroom being one of the obvious ones. The reason that people like them so much and the fact that they're used across the whole world is because they're easy to use, they're flexible and scalable, they're built for collaboration, and hopefully we'll see a little bit of that today in the live demo, and they're secure by design. So all of the tools are GDPR compliant, so you can go in and have a look at the terms and conditions and look at all the kind of security settings in there too. We've also launched a temporary hub, which is called Teach from Home. And basically, this is a set of resources to help teachers really kind of get up to scratch with how they can use the tools to effectively still teach whilst everyone is at home right now. There's kind of small how-to trainings on all the different tools. And a lot of the webinars that we're doing right now are related to some of these topics. So things like starting a video call with your class, or set up your home for video calling. And you'll notice that for those of you that have been tuning in, my background often changes slightly, so I've added a plant in today, but things like that really make a difference when you're trying to engage with people, particularly live, because it's really hard, right? We've had the conversation quite a number of times of how do you know that people are listening, or how do you know that people are still watching when you can't see them? So just trying to top tips on how to keep people engaged when you're doing things like this at home, particularly if you're teaching students. And there's also tutorials on there for kind of use cases of how you might use these tools for everyday classrooms as well. In addition to that, we have basically evolved our products. So since people have been using them a lot more, since people have been working from home and having to do distance learning, we've been upgrading and adding features to some of the tools, particularly around Google Meet. So if you want to find out more about the features or about the tools that we have, you can head over to the blog. Where the link is there, g.co/edu/COVID-19, and that's all kind of the upcoming stuff and all of the stuff that's been launched that you'll be able to make use of. We also have a teacher centre, so this is a kind of centre of training, but most importantly for this moment in time, we have created a distance learning series which takes you through resources and top tips on how to use the tools for distance learning. And then we have our UK webinar series, which if you're on the call today, you would have signed up for at this short link, bit.ly/GFE UK webinars, and you'll see all of the upcoming webinars on the upcoming page and links to where you can watch them. So feel free to share that with staff. We're seeing a lot of schools using it as almost their PD for staff, so they're not having to kind of recreate the wheel. So please feel free to share that, and we're seeing a lot of kind of individual schools sign up with lots of different staff members. In addition to that, you may know that last week was Teacher Appreciation Week, and to kind of support that, we've actually launched a brand new teacher centre. So I talked to you about how we have our distance learning resource on there, but we actually have a ton of resources. So if you want to do your level 1 and level 2 educator certifications, for example, you can do that at the Teacher Centre. But we also have lots of resources on how to get you started with G Suite. And specifically, we've just launched these new product guides on each individual tool that's available within G Suite for Education, including CS First. So that's about computer science. So if you're looking at, if you're an IT coordinator or you're teaching computing, that's definitely a good resource to check out. In addition to all of the other tools, you can find self-guided, self-paced resources there. And don't forget, you can watch back today's webinar by either just pressing on the YouTube clip and putting it back to where you want to watch it to, reusing the link, or heading over to the webinar website, and all of the previous webinars are stored there. So lots of ways that you can get lots of information to help you get going with G Suite. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Matt, who is going to take us through a demo of the ways that we can build out and create and do creative writing using some of the G Suite tools. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll ask Matt at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiri. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Hope you're all safe and well, first and foremost. So today what we're going to be looking at is creative writing, and primarily we're trying to find out how we can leverage some of the G Suite tools to really kind of engage our students and just to provide a bit of a different slant on some of the activities perhaps we would traditionally do. So the focus is creative writing, particularly through Google Forms, but we'll also be dipping into Google Drawings, Google Docs, and additionally, I'll show you how I would and did set this up as an activity with my students previously through Google Classroom, and how I add some of the resources to Google Sites. So there's quite a lot to cover. If I miss anything, please feel free to add it into the chat, but also we'll be picking up those questions as we go along. So yeah, feel free to add them in there. So why use G Suite for creative writing? Well, mainly for me, I always found that just that change in medium through something like Google Forms really engaged the students. So in particular, as I said, that's what we're going to focus on today. So as a starting point, I am in my Google Drive folder, and there are a number of ways that you can actually access Google Forms. So I could just right click here and select more and create a Google form there. I've also got the option of going up to the top menu, which is exactly the same, but I can access it that way as well. Or I can access it via the waffle and scrolling down to Google Forms. Well, this is actually quite a good way of accessing your forms, because as well as a standard Google form, you've got a whole host of different templates essentially that are available for you. And because you'll have an education subscription, some of them are already set up for some of the activities that you typically engage in, whether that's an exit ticket, assessment. But of course, it's only a template, so you can actually adapt as you need. Two options. If you create a Google form in Drive, it will be a Google form. However, if you come here, you can actually start off with a quiz straight away. Now, that doesn't matter too much because you can go back and forth between the two anyway, but it's just a bit of a shortcut. So that's how you access forms. What I'd like to take a look at first is how I've used forms in some other scenarios based on the key tool or the key feature, I suppose, that we're going to be looking at. So within a Google form, you can create what I refer to as branching. So you can use a section and go to a section based on answers to a question that you set. So we're just going to have a look at a couple of other examples, just as a nice lead in to some of these different tools. So if I open this one to begin with, how are you feeling today? So as a form, this was really just a bit of a quick check-in that, to be honest, can be used across a lot of different age groups, right from foundation phase, key stage 1, and even into key stage 3, but you may want to remove some of the pictures if some of the students aren't too keen on that. But essentially what I'm trying to do is just get a bit of a feeling before the day starts as to how my students are. So if I look here, I've got 3 answers, and if I just click into the question, you can see that what I've actually done is I've separated out into further sections. So if my student was to select this option here, happy, they would then go to this section and they could tell me a bit more about why they're feeling particularly happy at that point. Similarly, these other sections will then go down a little bit further on and just ask a slightly different question relating to how they're feeling. Now, this is useful in a variety of circumstances, just as a nice little check-in for your students. I got particularly good use of this with a boy in my class who was autistic, and he very much struggled with initiating any form of conversation around his feelings before the day started. Now, that was really important for us because the start of the school day was very much a trigger. So being able to give this to the young lad, and he would actually complete it, and before the day started, I already knew how he was going to be coming into school, and if there were any different measures that we needed to take, or actually if we just needed to sit down straight away and talk through, it was really good. But the benefit of this is because all of your responses can then be correlated in a spreadsheet, I can then share those responses with his mum. So his mum was also able to see how he was getting on throughout the school day as well. So it's just a really, really useful tool. Another example of one of those forms, if I go back to my drive, is just in maths. So as a 2D shaped decision tree, this is quite a common activity that you might do, but for students to be provided with a certain amount of shapes, and they are able to categorize those shapes depending on the different features of each one. And again, using sections to go through to each answer. Okay. And finally, one of my favorite ones was actually self-assessment. Just going to zoom in a bit there so you can see that a bit better. Okay. So in terms of self-assessment, this is one that I used pretty much every day. I used to link this to a QR code, put it onto the tables in front of the students, and they were able to access this and have this as a bit of an exit ticket or plenary each time. So you can see here that I've got first question, have you achieved the learning objective? Which is either yes or no. I've got a section here for yes, explaining how they've achieved the learning objective, or no/maybe, and then what did you find difficult? Now, in order to do that, all you need to do is navigate, once you've got your question ready, to this section here, and it actually says go to section based on answers, and I've got my options. So if they select yes, I'd like them to go here. If they select no, I want them to go to the no/maybe, and if they go to maybe, also here. Okay, so if we have a look at that as a live form, what you'll then see is that we'll take them through to the correct section, and then they can submit the form. Okay. Additionally, what we can do is add in, if I go back to this one here, we can go back to the last step, which I want to know, have they achieved the learning objective? Also, I want to know what their next steps are. So I'm going to add a section just below this and call it next steps. And then as a question, what do you think your next steps are? Okay. And for either of these two previous sections, if they have achieved the learning objective, well, I still want to know what it is that they need to actually move on to as a next step. So once they've completed that, I'm going to take them to the next steps. And similarly, if they found the session difficult, they can also go to the next step section. And then once they've finished, they simply submit the form. That comes through to me as a spreadsheet. I can monitor all of the answers, look where I might need to provide some of the students with a bit of extra support, and just go from there. So it's just a really handy tool and a really simple one to get started with. So that's just a very brief insight into how you can use sections and use the answers to basically branch them off in different directions. But today, what we're really looking at is creative writing. So how have I used this? Well, this originally took me back, and the kind of inspiration I had for this activity was when I was teaching in class, and a typical kind of scenario, I was trying to get some of my students engaged in reading and writing. Mostly the boys, as is quite often the case, but you know, it was very much broader than that, and it was a school objective that we just had to try and increase. Now, when I was younger, I was very similar, wasn't very engaged in reading, but I remember the first book that properly got me engaged in reading was actually one of these branching story books, an adventure book. And the first one I had was one about Loch Ness. And it was the first time I can remember not being able to actually put a book down. So it was very much an activity that I wanted to do with my students. So what we'll do through this part of the session now is I'll run you through that as an activity. I've got a lot of resources for you, templates, scaffolding for your students that you can then use as well. And we'll just take it through as an opportunity that you can use as to how you actually run this activity with students. So if we start off with the initial plan. So to begin with, I provide them with something like this. So this is using Google Drawings, a very, very simple tool to use. But you can see here the kind of flow that I'm looking for in this branching story. And the real importance of this, as with any writing, is to properly give a good structure for students to follow in order to make sure they're giving themselves the best chance in writing a successful piece of writing. So to begin with, there's no actual text in here apart from the high-level plan itself. So introduction, question 1, all of this will become a bit clearer. Option 1, option 2. So at this point, that question is going to give 2 different options for the reader to take in that story. If they go down option 1, it's story end. Option 2, to the farmhouse, it carries on and so forth. But as a tool to use, this is really, really straightforward. I'll give you a blank one of these so that you can use this with your students should you wish. But simply all you have to do, if I just right click on that, copy and paste, I can then start to move these around and begin the next part of my plan, okay? And to join these up together, if you select up here the line tool and hover over any box, you can see there are 4 purple dots, and it's as simple as dragging from one dot to the next, okay? So this is literally just to start off the initial plan, and we have a template available as well, which I'll share with you afterwards as a link. So you can share this with your students, and I'll also show you how we do this through Google Classroom. So to say, Google Drawings, there's not a huge amount to show because it's the main benefit of it is really its simplicity. So we'll now move on to how do we take the high-level plan here and put it into something a bit more concrete where the students can expand a little bit on those ideas and essentially write their story. So what we're going to look at is this plan. Okay, again, we've got a template for this. So I've named this story Into the Unknown. It's basically a third-person narrative, so a fiction piece of writing. And you can see in terms of the planning, what helped the students particularly with this is just color coding some of the boxes so that they knew exactly what it is they need to be moving on to, and more importantly, how to structure their story. So using that initial story plan that I have here, they can then start to expand into this section. So this is just a straightforward Google Doc. I've created a table, and at different points, I've just merged some of the cells, again, just to help the students guide them through how they actually get to their different branching elements of their story. So as you can see, first question or problem, which would be the question in the Google form, is Michael knew he had a choice to make, and does he go home and give the key to his mum or continue and go to the farmhouse? And then we've just completed this story with further options, further questions, and just completed the overall narrative to it. So in terms of Google Docs, we'll share this with you as a template, but Docs is very straightforward, and literally all we've done here is just added in a simple table. Okay, so that's the planning side. And again, just to emphasize that the planning in this is key, because ultimately we want them to engage with the tools, but the main purpose of this task is actually the creative writing. So we want to try and do everything we can to make it as straightforward and seamless for the students so they can actually get on and start writing. So the actual form that we have is this one here. And I've already started to populate this just to show you the basic structure. So the way I do this is I use a section as the main kind of part of the story, and then add in questions as I go through. And you can see here that I've put the sections in, and I've already started to navigate and build some of the different routes that the reader would actually take. Okay, so if we go a bit further down, you can see there's some more options here. And again, we'll share this form with you afterwards, so you've got a bit of an example. But this is where I am at the moment. So they got to the door, and I need to know what options we actually have next. So if I go back to my plan and scroll down, where does the door lead? So it's going to be one of two places, an enchanted land or a gloomy hallway. So if I go back to my form, what I need to do is add in a question. But just before that, to make it easier for me, I'm going to do the actual possible routes first. So one route is the enchanted land, and one route is the hallway. Okay, and now I've got those in place. If I go back to this section here, I can add my question. Where does the door lead? Now, one of the great things about forms is that it will identify what type of question you're asking and will predict the type of answer that you want to give. However, at this point, it said short answer when actually what I want is multiple choice. And I put enchanted land, press enter, or I go to the hallway. And because I've already built my sections, and this is the way I would encourage students to do it, if I now go to section based on answer, it's just much simpler because I can quite simply see here, I've got enchanted land and I've got hallway. Okay, and that's it. Now, if I go to the chest here, I have, what does it contain? Well, mysterious objects or an ancient map. And I do exactly the same process. So I build my sections, and another one, mystery objects, and I can go back to here and add my question. What does a chest contain? Ancient map or mystery objects. So hopefully what you're able to see here is that it's a relatively straightforward process, providing that you put your sections in, because you can simply just choose each one. Now, rather than just having it all as text, I've also got the option within any question to add an image. So if I refer back to the first form I showed you with the happy and sad face and so on, this is a similar approach. So if I go to my Google Drive, I've got access to all of my different images. I forgot what I was trying to get now. Ancient map and mystery objects. So there's my ancient map. Okay, and if I go to this one here, I've got an enchanted land, and I've got my hallway. There you go. Now, very quickly, what you'll start to do is build up and get into a bit of a rhythm with this. And this was probably one of the most successful activities I did with my students, mainly because it engaged them, engaged everyone, which, you know, is not always the easiest thing to do. But I think where this really comes into its own is the ability in being able to import your own images and encouraging the students to actually go outside, take your own pictures, upload them to Google Drive. And particularly at this moment in time, you know, we are restricted in terms of what we can do, but we can still use different parts around the house, go out into the garden, we're able to exercise, go out into different walks, explore the countryside perhaps, and actually take your own pictures to help build as part of this story. Now, for some students, the building of the form you may think could be a bit tricky. But what you can also do is, if I go back to Google Forms itself, is you can see up here we've got template gallery. Now, if I go into the template gallery, I don't have any templates at the moment. But what I could do is I could build a Google form for my students as a template, which already links to different sections, and they can just actually add the content that they want to and drop it in as they start to build their story. So as an activity, it's a number of different ways that you can actually get into it. So now that I've got my form here, how do I want to share it and how do I want to have the settings? Well, up here I can change the theme. I can upload an image, which gives me a bit of a background, and I can also add different theme colors and background colors should I wish. In terms of the settings, you're thinking about how the end user is going to use this. Well, as it's really a student creating a story for others to view, they don't really need to collect email addresses. They don't really need to collect names. You may want to restrict users to your organization so the students are only sharing it internally. Do I want to limit it to one response? Absolutely not, because I want the students or the reader to be able to go back and forth. One of my favorite things with those books is if I hit a dead end at one particular branch of the story, I used to go back to some of the previous pages to try a different route. So you want them to be able to do that. There is no edit after submit as such, and you don't really need to see summary charts and text responses. In terms of presentation, I've simply just said, I hope you enjoyed the story. And as it's not a quiz, we don't need to look at those at all. Okay. When I'm ready to send, I can then send that to whoever I want. So I can email them directly, which is probably the easiest for students. But what I'll show you shortly is how you set this up in Google Classroom. So it's all in one place, and importantly, you're able to actually look at all of the different resources as well. So additional activities that you could think of for this, particularly for those students who are potentially less able or might find this a bit tricky, you could write part of the story and ask your students to contribute or complete certain sections, because again, the beauty of Google is you can collaborate very easily. We could have just one collaborative story as a class and use that one form for almost pupils to vote on the different paths that they want to take. And then you can build a class story together, a little bit more labor intensive on the teacher's part, but it's still a nice activity. Often I used to start these types of activities just with a Google Doc. So straight to a Google Doc and set up a very basic table for some story openers or some vocabulary building. I'd set that up through Google Classroom. And one particular favorite of mine was actually just setting up a Google form. And within a form, you can set up, I'll just put it on here for now to show you, if I was to add a question. One of the really good ones is a file upload. So when I was building these types of stories with the students, obviously they're all in different areas. They've got different things to take photographs of, but they would all send them into one single place so that the students could say, oh, I've got like that picture, I want to bring it into my story. So just a little bit of way of building that collaboration, getting a bit more inspiration for the students beyond what's in their immediate vicinity. So that's pretty much it for a branching story. There are, as I say, other options in forms which we could take you through, and we will take you through in future webinars. But for now, what I'd like to do is just show you pretty much how I would set this up as an activity in Google Classroom. So I'm back in Drive at the moment. I'll navigate to Classroom here. And you'll see Mr. Smith's class. So at the moment, I've just created some 3 fictitious students. Now, to go through Classroom takes quite a bit of time, and we don't have a huge amount of time. So I'll just focus on some of the key items. Your stream is pretty much an overview of everything that takes place in your class. You could think of it a bit like a Facebook feed or a news feed, that kind of thing. And you can just share some brief notes with your class, could be announcements, that kind of thing. Over here, I have people. So I'm the only teacher at the moment, but I could invite others. And I have 3 students as well. There is also a marks functionality in here, which isn't set up because I haven't set an assignment yet, but we could do a whole session, I think we are actually, just on feedback. So that will feature as an element of that in later webinars. But the main part I want to have a look at is Google Classwork. So the options within here, first things first, is I'm going to create a topic. Now, this is a relatively new feature, but it just helps to separate out some of the different assignments and resources that you're going to be providing your students. So now I've got my topic, I'm going to create an assignment. So you'll get a lot of these if you're using it for the first time, just little hints and tips. So this is, as a title, branching story. And I've just previously put some instructions or written out some instructions, which I'll just paste in there. Okay, so let's get creative. The task here is to build a branching adventure style story with a third person narrative focus. Obviously, as a teacher, you could add in some different success criteria as you see fit. And here's some things to help with the story. So what do they have? They have a template branching story plan and a template creative writing plan. So that's the planning tools they need. But I also want to give them some examples so they can see what that looks like. So if I add from here and go to Drive, first I'm going to go to my template plan. I'm also going to add an example so they can see what a good one looks like. Then I'm going to give them the creative writing plan, which is the Google Doc. So this all corresponds as is required. So that's the actual example. So let's add the plan. Which has disappeared. Look. Okay, I'll find that in a second. But the third action I want them to do, as well as actually completing the plan, is to use a Google form to create their branching story. Now, within this, you wouldn't want to necessarily set up a form because they would all access that. And actually what you want to be able to do is just to get them to attach a resource to it. So with any assignment in Classroom, it doesn't have to, by any means, be part of the actual overall activity. What we're looking at is getting them to attach their original resource to this as an assignment. Okay, and then eventually, if you have got a learning journal as demonstrated by Beth in the previous webinar, or you have got a class site as demonstrated by Ryan in the first one, you can also get them to add it on there. Now, I don't want any due date necessarily, give them a bit of time on that. I'm going to leave it unmarked. I can actually provide feedback, but I'm not going to mark it on a points basis. And just for organization, I'm going to add it into creative writing. Now, we don't have time to look at this rubric, but it's a fantastic new addition where you can add effectively a set of success criteria for students to access and work through. So that's really nice. What I am going to do, however, is click originality reports. Okay, now this is a kind of a plagiarism tool, and just to make sure that nothing is being copy and pasted off of Google or any of the web pages. So it's just a bit of a backup more than anything else. So once I've done that, I would assign that, and the students will have access to all of those resources. They can work through it, they can contact me via Classroom, they can leave comments, they can talk with each other about that assignment, and essentially just submit what it is they need as they go through. Okay, and then finally, just to mainly so we can provide you with some of these resources, is you remember that if you joined on the first webinar, Ryan created a resource hub. So the purpose of the resource hub is to, well, it's two things really. It's to show you how you can set something up with your class, but actually it's also to just give us a bit of a vehicle to share some of the things that we have with you. Now, we're all collaborators on this, and we are on to the Pages tab. And if I open this up, you can see that Ryan has already created some pages that are ready to house all of the resources. I am currently webinar 3, and I have started to add just some of the forms and some of the other resources for you to use. Okay, so that's all there available for you. And all I need to do now, just as a reminder, if you do have this approach with your students, is to show that page in navigation. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I hope you found it useful. If there's any questions, I'll try and catch up through the trail now just to answer any questions. As I said, this is just one idea about creative writing with students. I found it particularly engaging and really enjoyed it, but more importantly, the students did as well. And for age ranges, you can cover quite a wide age range within this. It's really just how you, through the tools that we've shared, want to scaffold it and make it more accessible for some of your students. So that's pretty much it from me. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch up with you on the chat soon.
Thanks, Matt. We're a bit delayed there and coming in. Awesome. That was really, really great. I love the idea of doing branching stories, particularly with Google Forms. There are a couple of questions that came in, particularly around the start. And if we can just bring Matt's screen back in. Just one of the questions was, can you drag and drop with the plan? So I think that was maybe referring to Google Drawings. So if you can just head back there and just kind of maybe just quickly show how you might do that.
To drag and drop, I didn't see the question, sorry. It was to drag and drop.
Can you drag and drop? So if you wanted to change things around, for example, where the boxes are, I think, you know, yeah, just moving boxes like that.
Yeah, yeah, sure. It's this is a really nice flowchart tool, and actually, if you do flowcharts properly, you can have a better range of shapes. So you might have test my memory now, I think it's a diamond for a decision in a flowchart. I could be wrong, apologies if so. But you can create proper flowcharts in here with a lot of these different signs. But yeah, essentially you can just get any boxes, move them anywhere that you wish. I try and keep this as part of the activity very, very basic, because it's really just to try and get that route understood and for the students to see clearly, and more importantly, refer back to how they want to use it. But you can see there, if I need to delete a link, I just highlight it and delete, and then when I'm ready to link something back up, I can just do that.
And I guess just a question for me as well, because if we're thinking, I mean, you know, I guess kind of like branching stories may not be as commonly seen in secondary schools, for example. And what I really like about this is it's completely adaptable, right? So I think for any age range, doing something like this just for planning and getting even students to create this for themselves without maybe having a template even is a really good practice and a good way of using something like Google Drawings. You could also use Jamboard, for example, to kind of create that plan, that visual plan that they can then take away and then build out a story based on that. So yeah, I really love this concept. I think it's a great idea. Another question came in. Did you create the story? Would you then create the story together in the classroom? I know that you did talk to this, but yeah, how would you then go about creating that story? Would students do it? Would you do it and get them to build the form? How do you see that most commonly used?
I think ultimately it comes down to age group. So, you know, I would be as a standalone activity. I did this with year 4s, years 5s and year 6s, and they would build the forms themselves. Now, granted, the younger you go, the more kind of direction you might need to give. But the first time I did it, I didn't use drawings as a plan, and I didn't use docs. So I kind of learned from that as a mistake, because just the simple color coding between those two elements of the plan just made the whole process later on that much more seamless. But I think in the classroom, absolutely, I would build one together first as a point of good practice, just so they could see what that process is. And I might even screencast it, so record it as I'm doing it, upload it to Classroom as a resource afterwards, so that the students can watch it back either in class or when they're at home.
Awesome. I had a question come in, and I'll answer this one from Jonathan, which was about originality reports. So Matt did highlight originality reports in Google Classroom. Right now, you can run up to 3 reports. You can run up to reports on 3 different assignments with your kind of standard Google Classroom, G Suite for Education users. But if you want to have unlimited reports per classroom, then you would need to look at G Suite Enterprise for Education, which is a paid for kind of subset of tools that we see in kind of big higher education organizations, etc. So if you are kind of using G Suite for Education, maybe think about how you're setting up your assignments where you want them to be able to be originality checked, because it is currently limited to 3 per classroom, and then the students can run it up to 3 times per assignment. I think we had, let me just check, we had any more questions. I know there was a specific question about Google Forms bringing back or marking wrong answers but still awarding points. To be honest, without actually seeing that, we're not going to be able to probably troubleshoot that question. And I know that some guidance was given already in the chat about making sure that you've got all of the kind of wrong answers as well that could be right, so like capitalization and misspelling of words, and I know that was fair, that's been done. So again, without actually seeing it, I wouldn't be able to comment on kind of what's causing that issue. But what I would always recommend is you can either raise a support ticket in your admin console, so get your IT administrators to do that on your behalf, or you can send feedback via the feedback button in Google Forms, which is the little question mark, and send feedback. You'll be able to do it there. So please feel free to do that. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks so much for that, Matt. That was really, really useful. I learned a lot. Not being an ex-English teacher, by teaching business, I don't think I would have probably necessarily needed to use that, but I definitely would have got them to draw stakeholder charts in exactly the same way. So yeah, really, really useful. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to pass over to Vicky and John, who's going to be talking to us about their stories of using G Suite for distance learning. Hi, both.
Hi guys.
It would be great if you could introduce yourself before you get going with your presentation. And with that, I'll pass over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kiri, and thanks for that, Matt. There's definitely something there that we can take back and use at Green Hill. So, as mentioned earlier, my name's Jonathan Evans. I'm a teacher of ICT and computer science at Green Hill School in Tenby. I'm also the DCF, the Digital Competence Framework Coordinator for the school.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Vicky Price, and I'm Head of Computing at our school, Green Hill. I'm also a Level 1 Google educator as well, working towards my Level 2. So let us start by telling you a little bit about our school. We're a secondary school in Tenby in Pembrokeshire, and we have over 900 pupils on our roll, aged between 11 and 18. Currently, we use G Suite for Education for most of our teaching and learning needs. And we are a school that's in Estin's special measures after being put in there, after being in monitoring for some time.
So we want to talk to you really about our Google journey, our digital journey. I thought the best thing to do would be to tell you, where we were possibly 5-10 years ago. So as far back as 2012, I signed the school up for Google for Education. It was something that I'd seen online, I'd heard from colleagues in other schools and what have you. And it was a case of just giving it a go and seeing whether it would fit with what we were doing. So we initially used it with ICT lessons only, and we were fortunately linked with our SIMS system, our MIS, so every student and member staff would have an account. And we initially used it for things like Gmail, so that people could email each other, and for Google Drive for sharing files with pupils and vice versa if they were going to submit some work to us. At the time, I was learning as I was doing it. Some colleagues came on board, the Welsh back that we have for Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5. They started using it. So staff were slowly getting involved with using Google and using Google Classroom. A number of staff put it in as part of their performance management. And it grew from there, really. So fast forward to the beginning of last year, so in 2019, in January, we could see that this system was working well for us, but we just wanted to formalize it. We wanted to have some sort of structure in place where pupils could have an expectation or level of expectation with regards to the digital platform we were using. So I spoke to pupils, we spoke to staff, we wanted to include parents because it was that triangulated communication, and it was clear from the outset that Google and Google Classroom would give us the platform that we need. So we spent a lot of time in the summer term giving staff some training. So I held a number of insets. We had a twilight session in July, and the vision was that students would return in September and they would have a Google class for all of their subjects. So a student would log in and they'd see their 10 plus subjects. So we wanted to make sure that staff were comfortable with that. And similar with a lot of things with Google, it's a case of you just got to do it. You've got to jump in and trial it for yourselves. So in July, staff were given an opportunity to create their classes, and codes then were produced as each class was being produced. So that in September, those codes could be given to our students, and they would then gradually join the classes. It was important that we left staff to decide how they were going to use it. We didn't want to go in and change teaching and learning in different subjects and ask schemes of work to be reproduced. It was a case of, this is the platform, we want you to use it where you see fit. Up until September, we did have homework planners, so we decided to abort the use of the homework planner and go down the Google Classroom route, so that students would then actively know that this is where they were going to get the notifications. We discussed it and made parents aware that there's a Google Classroom app, and this app would give you the notifications as and when that information came through. So as the academic year has gone on, we've been using it more and more across the school. And then that marries into then what actually happened in March. So I'm sure we're all in the same boat where, you know, we knew at some point that it was highly likely that schools were going to be closed. We weren't sure when, but we also weren't in a position where we needed to panic. We met, myself and Vicky, we met with the school management, and it was fairly clear that, you know, we were nearly in the position that we needed to be should school be closed. First and foremost, we asked staff to check that every pupil was in their class. We had students moving classes throughout the year, so we needed to make sure that was in place. If any students had joined the school. So whereas previously we'd use the codes and ask the students to join, we're at a stage now where we needed to look at registers, and we needed to manually add any students that weren't in those classes. I also put together a whole school class. That way we knew that we had every student in one place should we need to make any announcements en masse. That was an easy process. It's the first time I've done anything of that scale, but it was a case of importing 600-700 email addresses, and it was only a couple of clicks. So that was in place. We then needed to ensure that pupils and parents, okay, and I mentioned parents again because that was something that we wanted to make sure parents were clear of what was going on. We wanted to have somewhere where they could go in order to gain information and be confident and comfortable with what's going on. So I used Google Sites. It's something we've used in ICT lessons, and it's something that we will continue to use in order to put out information. So I put together a digital learning website that would contain basically any resource that we felt that pupils and parents would need, whether it was letters that had been emailed. We put attachments of PDFs on there. If there was any training videos, any demonstrations and so on. And then ultimately I've been adding to that then as and when the weeks have gone by whilst the school has been closed. Staff also needed somewhere to go to. So I've created a staff one. So that it's very similar in the setup, but ultimately it's from a teaching perspective. So any demos and any videos would be from that teacher viewpoint. And that's proved successful. And then as the time has progressed, that website is getting more and more information.
Thank you, John. We knew that if we were to be successful in our virtual journey, that well-being was going to be paramount and really important. So there are a number of ways that we've tried to achieve some well-being sort of activities within our days and weeks. So one of the first things that the senior team decided to continue to do was briefing every day at 8:30 in the morning. Now, this is a really, really good time for all staff to get together, see each other, have an informal chat before briefing starts, and then we have a formal sort of briefing from our head teacher. We also have, during these briefings, Fun Day Friday. So as you can see on the screen there, there's a few of our members of staff dressed in various outfits. I myself went as Darth Vader, and John, I think, was Super Mario. We're just trying to bring some fun into our weeks. We've had Mascot Friday and 2.6 active as well. We have our wellbeing support person, and that's Natalie. You can see her in the picture there, dressed as a pirate. She sends us daily motivational emails. She's there at the end of the line if we need her. One of our favourite things is our pupil happy video, which is up on social media, and you should be getting a link to. That's a really, really lovely video where we could see our pupils, and we asked them to put together a happy video to put into the classroom that John mentioned in an assignment, so that we could put together that video. So hopefully you'll get to see that during this webinar as well. So there's always the practical sides of things. So how we structured our days for our pupils was really important, and Google came into its own in this. We have our Key Stage 4 and 5 pupils still following their timetables, and if they had 5 lessons a day, they would do those 5 lessons between the hours of 9 AM and 5 PM. And that was scheduled then for them to be handed in at that time. With Key Stage 3, it was slightly different. Key Stage 3, they would do a 90-minute session in the morning on a core subject, and then a 90-minute session in the afternoon. So all that scheduling would come into play so that everybody knew where they were. Nobody didn't understand, what they needed to do during that day, and we weren't bombarding them with a lot of work. Some of our pupils did struggle with the resources for digital learning, so we've loaned out a lot of Chromebooks from the school to try and support them with that. And our form tutors are contacting home as well, just to touch base and see if there's any more support that we can give. We're very interested in feedback. So at the moment we have a Year 10 feedback survey that is out there, waiting to see if there's anything that Year 10 want to tell us that we can improve on, because we are a self-improving school, and we do want to make sure that we listen to our pupils and change anything that they think needs changing. And then we have key staff allocated to key pupils, and these have all been added to their Google Classrooms so that they can support them independently as they go along.
Thanks, Vicky. So we're now in a position where the Monday where the school was closed, or the first day where we were in lockdown, staff were in a position where they were relatively comfortable with what they needed to do. But what we wanted to ensure, and following on from the well-being, is that staff knew that there was going to be support, knew that they weren't alone, and we wanted also to continue the development and the momentum that they could give us. So the opportunity was there. So at 10 AM on that first Monday, we met online as a group, and ultimately it was in place for us to discuss anything digital, anything Google, anything tech related, and it was a successful meeting, which meant we met at 10 AM the next day, and we continued 10 AM every day that week, and our Geek Meet, as it's now called, grew from there. And like I said, it's just an opportunity for us to be face to face over the internet, but also to have that point of contact. And my initial vision was to go through certain tools that we use. So I mentioned the setting of assignments, and Vicky mentioned the scheduling. We wanted to make sure that people are comfortable with that. And it would potentially be me demoing something, then we'd have a little bit of a discussion, question and answer. And it's grown to a position now where colleagues of mine who want to contribute, who are doing something in their subjects, will bring it to the table, and we're just sharing ideas. So importantly, with Google Classroom, we found that there are third-party websites, third-party educational tools that can be embedded. So we looked at things like Kahoot, quizzes, Flipgrid, and so on. We're a GCSE pod school. So it was an opportunity for me, not necessarily just to send out an email with some information, but to actually provide a live demo. So that's been really successful. It's been one of the biggest successes, really, certainly for me personally. I'd send an email every afternoon with a bit of collection of information. If staff had come to me personally with any queries, any problems that I felt your colleagues would want to know or would be beneficial if they had that information, then I'd put it in there. And I'll always go back to that staff well-being, in a sense that we aren't alone. It is new. And within our school at Greenhill, we have got a huge amount of knowledge that we can tap into, and this situation has given us the opportunity to develop that. So the Geek Meet and that meeting online, and that consistency as far as ensuring that we are delivering a similar teaching and learning experience for our pupils without dictating what every subject needs to do has been really important. So whilst on the topic of sharing ideas on a daily basis, I just want to go back to Easter. So in Wales, we had 2 weeks of distant learning, where as a school, I think we just went from there to there in a matter of weeks, and I think it's purely down to the confidence of the staff. Our staff, to be fair, knew a lot more than they probably had confidence in delivering, but ultimately we were in a position where we had to do that delivering. So we didn't want to lose the momentum. So during the last couple of days before what would be our Easter 2-week holiday, I set up a Google Sheets document where colleagues were able to feed in any resources that they felt we could provide pupils and parents over the coming 2 weeks, and that snowballs really into a sheet for each year group. It can be filtered by subjects, and it was anything really from an app, a website, a Netflix video, anything related to their subject that we felt pupils could access online. And that proved really successful. So hopefully we'll be in a position to give you a link to that, and by all means feel free to take whatever would support you and your schools. So that's a whistle-stop journey really. We're by no means experts, we're by no means a finished article. We're learning every single day. We're lucky that we've got staff who are positive in a sense that they want to learn. One positive that will come out of this is when we return to school, whenever that'll be, I know for a fact that schemes of work are going to be tweaked. They're going to be adapted to include some of the lessons and some of the skills that we've picked up and colleagues have added to their lessons in the last couple of months. We're also in a position where I'm pretty sure pupils are going to expect more and more of this. So that's something that we're going to be mindful of, because ultimately they're learning with us, they're on this journey, and it's been fantastic to see. So personally, I've got to thank colleagues, thank Vicky for support and what have you, because ultimately we're heading in such a fantastic direction. So thank you for me, thank you for Google, Kiri, for having us. It'd be awesome if anyone sees anything that they feel we could add, to put it in the chat and help us continue to develop and improve as a digital school. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll back that up as well. Thank you very much, Google, for hosting, and Kiri and Sky in the background there. Hi, Sky, you're not getting away with it. And then and Ryan from Aspire to Be for inviting us on here. Great, brilliant.
Thank you both. It was really I think what's really interesting about your story, and I think we're starting to see this a lot, is actually what does it mean after this, right? Like what does it mean for your school after you go back? Because things are going to change, right? Like you're now delivering things in a different way, and maybe you're looking, you were talking about your schemes of work there, maybe you're more kind of online and thinking about things digitally, and what does that mean for students, right? And how can they access the curriculum in a slightly different way? And it looks like you were on a really good journey, but what's happened is it's just had to escalate, and your staff have had to get on board and had to kind of take the bit of a plunge, which I think is a great thing. And sometimes we need that little bit of something to push us in order to get there. So just great work. And I absolutely love the fact that you've created all these resources and that you're engaging with your staff and students the way that you are. And it's just amazing to see. And thank you so much for sharing your story today.
No, as you said, there's so much pressure on teachers elsewhere with regards to what's the expectation, that the digital side of things tends to be something that people aren't wanting to touch. So we're in that corner now where we have to do it. So, you know, it's going to be fantastic to actually see now where we are in possibly 3 to 4 months' time.
That's awesome. Well, we are just about out of time, so I think I'd like to bring Matt back in as well, and I just wanted to kind of pose a question really to you all. Obviously, you guys are quite far along in your journey, and Matt, obviously your experiences with working with different schools. You know, if you were speaking to teachers out there who were just getting started out, or you know, maybe haven't been using technology at all and are kind of having to do it right now, and really come on that journey, thinking about the fact that some of your teachers have been in that position as well, what would be the kind of piece of advice, or what would be the tool that you would suggest for those teachers to use? I'll go to Matt first, and then I'll go to Vicky, and then to John. So over to you, Matt. What would your piece of advice be?
I think the first thing I would encourage them to use is Google Classroom, mainly because it's a very easy entry point. From a leadership perspective, for any school thinking of trying to implement this, it's really not trying to do too much too soon, and understanding that actually you've got a huge range of staff, all with different experiences, all with different confidence levels, but also all with different competence levels as well in terms of how they're actually using technology. So it's really about trying to set achievable goals based on the skill level of your staff and ultimately how confident they are, making sure there's a good enough support network in place, whether that's key members of the team forming part of a digital team to try and support and provide training via webinars and Google Meet, that kind of thing. But literally the first starting point for me as a teacher, I would want to set, I would say the easiest way is to set a piece of home learning or distance learning, as we're in now, on Google Classroom in a Google form as a basic quiz, just to see the mechanics of how to set the assignment, have it automatically mark, enjoy not having to mark it, and then just doing that for a little while and build up your confidence. It's as simple as that. Thanks,
Matt. Over to you, Vicky. What would your piece of advice be?
I would go with Google Classroom as well. So he stole that one off me. So, but I would probably start with Google Drive, because I think the resources that our sort of teachers and staff have, to organise them first in Google Drive, so that you've got them ready when you're starting to build your classrooms and put your resources together, that everything is there in the background ready, because you may have them, you know, in different platforms and you may need to convert them. And I think that would be a good starting point, is to sort of collaborate in Google using shared drives, build your drives up for your departments, you know, with somebody maybe in each shared drive that, you know, has the skills that can support those staff, so that they've got everything ready to then move on, like Matt said, into Google Classroom with some sort of the more basic things to start them off. That's where I would go.
Thanks, Vicky. And we do actually have a webinar previously that I think we hosted last week, which is on our webinar page that you can check out on how to get started with Google Drive. So that's a really good one to shout out. I love Google Drive. It's one of those kind of easy ones, right, where you think, oh, just everyone knows what you mean, but actually it's an important starting point to get it right. Thank you. And then over to you, John, last but not least.
Thank you very much. I'd say if there's anything that interests you within the suites, just to try it. There's no harm in learning from a mistake. You're either going to not do it again, or you're going to tweak it and make sure it's slightly better next time. So I'd certainly kind of build up your confidence in a sense that your pupils are your audience, and they're not going to mind. They're going to want to try something different, and if it doesn't work, then within a week they'd have forgotten you've done it. But ultimately, if I was going to be specific, I like the use of Google Slides as a booklet. So within your assignments, you can create a template in the same way as they would a textbook. Set it so that they get a copy each, which is we've done a lot at Greenhill, and then the students then can customize and personalize that booklet in the same way as they would if they had a book in a classroom subject.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really great tips there. Well, with that, I think we're going to draw it to a close. We do have a feedback form just at the bottom there. It'd be great if you could fill it in. We are looking at kind of what is our next step in terms of these webinars, and whether just to find out if they're still useful and if people have kind of got what they need to get out of them, or there's other things that we could have a look at. So please make sure that you give us the feedback in the feedback form down below, and it's also posted in the comments. With that, I'm going to say thank you to Vicky and John for coming and spending your time preparing and presenting today. I think just as much as everyone's been saying in the chat, it's so useful to have to realize that we're all in this together, and it's not just you're not alone. So it's really great to hear that. And also thank you to Matt for giving us some great ideas on how we can use some of the G Suite tools, particularly for creative writing, but you can probably see how Google Forms can be used for lots of different things as well. So thank you for that as well, Matt. With that, we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow for our, maybe later on today, tomorrow or Thursday, for any of the webinars that we have coming up. Don't forget to check them out at the webinar site, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.